One. Okay. Share screen. It's getting more and more absurd every time I play that. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well, thank you.
Collection.
How are you?
Tired. Been a busy day. Lots of different things. This is supposed to be a holiday for me, but yeah, it's been. You know, when you get free time, everything gets sucked in. As a parent, I think you can. I'm not a parent, but you are. So yeah. So it's slightly different tonight from my point of view because it's more vocal than brass that I think you're known for, and
Okay.
I had to sort of send out a few messages and say, can you put some music? Because my vocal collection, as a lot of people will know, it's not that extravagant, but I don't want to let that stop me from talking to wonderful, intelligent people about their music. So welcome to the club.
Thank you.
Where did it all begin? Where did your musical prowess start?
So I'm from quite a musical family. Grew up obviously in the Salvation Army. My mum was my singing company leader. She's now a songster leader at her course, so she's a good pianist. And she helped me a lot when I first started. So she tells me I wrote my first song age 5.
Very Mozartian.
And basically sang things to her and she wrote them down. And then obviously as I got older, it developed. So I remember still in primary school entering all sorts of like songwriting competitions,
Really?
local radio jingles. I wrote a primary school hymn that we used at harvest and that sort of stuff. A couple of bits and pieces that we used, like either with the YP Corps or with the Sing Company as a kid. And then I think I went quiet for a few years in my early teens, but when I got to kind of 15, 16, started tinkling around on the piano myself, and that was when I really kicked off. And then I've just been, music's just something that's in me. I've got to get out, so I do it all the time.
Who would be your guinea pigs for the latest musical composition? Then, I mean, if you've outside of someone asking you to write a song or a lyric or some kind of composition, you know, something's, you know, 7 o'clock at night, you're tinkering on the piano and it comes. Who would be the person that you think, you know what, I'll give them a go?
Well, that very much depends what it is. I would say probably 90% of the stuff I write doesn't get heard.
Oh.
That's just what it's like when you're writing, I think, especially when you're starting out. And although I've been writing for a long time, in terms of actually getting my music played out and certainly published, I'm very early on, hopefully in a series of what will prove to be rather more of a career as a Salvation Army composer. So it very much depends. It's like, you know, I write bits and bobs I write quite a lot for our worship band at the Corps, which, you know, I hear regularly. I write bits and pieces for the band to help out for certain occasions or whatever, which I get to hear lots. But actually, in terms of just the music that's in my head that I want to hear played, yeah, it doesn't happen all that often, if I'm honest.
Oh, what a pity. I'm sure it's bursting to get out.
My most productive time. So you said I'm more a choral composer or vocal composer. So far,
I don't know. Are you? I mean, I've
had 3
come to you via the vocal side of things, but for all I know, you could be a bursting guitar, trumpet.
Well,
I don't know. This is the finding out.
So I've had 3 Sing Company pieces published and 3 Unity Series band pieces published. So I'm exactly half and half at the moment in terms of published. So for me, I don't see myself as a vocal composer or as a band composer or anything else. I'm just a musician who's got ideas, and because we're in the Salvation Army, the mediums that we have to get those ideas out, to express yourself, is a brass band, is a vocal group of some description, more often than not. So that tends to be what I write for. I'm and I spent a long time as the YP band leader and singing company leader at my corps at Liverpool Walton. So I wrote a lot for singing company at the time, and then when I was YP band leader, I wrote a lot for YP band at the time. So that's what you get, you know.
Yeah. So can you remember the first piece you had published?
Yeah. So gosh, I think I was 21. So 14 years ago. It's a good while, isn't it? And it was a sing company piece called "You're the Light."
Yeah.
And I think it was the only time I've ever managed to successfully write lyrics for a Christian song.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sing to the Lord, Children's Voices, Volume 13.
there you
It's
go.
all
You
I
see,
is all I can trace. I can't tell you when it's published. On the vocal, they don't do the dates. On the brass, it's Bow Down Before Him in
yeah,
2018. A lovely little prelude.
yeah,
So it's a mix and match. So
absolutely.
you don't mind what comes. It's just whatever's in the bloodstream at the time. And if unless you've got a commission. So I mean, you don't necessarily. I mean, I haven't seen the score notes for the Sing Company, the Sing to the Lord journals, but you've got three. As you say, you're the Light, King of Heaven. I Look to the Hills.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of story behind the pieces. I mean, how did they? You're the Light. How did that come about?
You're the Light. So when I was in my teens, I wrote mostly songs because I was kind of a joint leader of the kind of youth worship band at my home corps. So I used to write lots of songs that we used to use with that. And this was in a similar vein, although it wasn't one that we ever used with that because it was a bit too choral rather than congregational maybe. And it's just kind of a little rocky sort of thing. I was quite keen that there ought to be songs where the words were something that children could relate to.
Yeah.
I think there's a very strange thing that happens sometimes when you're in the singing company, and I remember it kind of standing up singing things and not really getting it.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the language, but certainly some of the ideas, not really getting it.
Yeah.
And then I remember when I was singing company leader, I used to sing, my singing company used to sing "Guardian of My Soul," the Darren Shaw chorus.
Wow, that's a heavy. That's a lovely piece.
Beautiful piece. And then halfway through, it gets to the line, "All your wounds are now my healing." And one little boy, months after we'd been singing it out, says to me, "Why is it saying all your rooms?"
Mm,
All your rooms? And he'd just been singing the wrong word the whole time.
yeah.
And that idea that some songs for kids are just so hard to access because the ideas are so hard to access. So my sing company pieces have all got very, very basic lyrics because that was my excuse for not being able to write very good lyrics.
If you can't make it accessible and the children can't understand, then it's kind of missing the point of writing the music, really. Because if you're writing it for kids to learn about the love of God, and if they're totally confused, you're not helping the situation, are you?
Absolutely. Yeah, you and I will know that the songs that we sing in worship that strike us the most are the songs that express something that we relate to instantly.
There's a connection.
I think when Dean was talking to you the other week, he was talking about the visual pictures in some songs are the things that he really clings on to. So that he was talking, "I know the hero art," wasn't it? And that's, for some people, that's the thing. So you cling to a visual picture, and for other people, you cling to a certain phrase or a scripture verse or whatever it is. And that doesn't happen with kids unless it's in a language they get and they understand. So that's what I tried to do. I don't know if I was successful.
No, because it reminds me of a lot of people will be surprised that I was actually in the singing company at Woodbridge, hence the flag, Woodbridge Singing Company. And I remember years later, I vividly remember I was in the car with my father. We were going to the chip shop to get some supper, and we just saw this beautiful sunset. And I just started singing, "I'm surprised by the sun in the morning." And 25 years after, I could still remember the lyrics because it connected. And some of them singing company songs that you grew up with, they stick with you. And
so important.
Yeah. So when you have to start your compositions, whether you're just adding the music to a set of lyrics, is it a case of sheet of paper, or is it open the laptop and the music notation software, or is it a bit of both?
I very rarely write anything on paper anymore. Only if I'm somewhere I've got an idea and I've got a bit of paper and I know I'm going to forget the idea, would I write it down?
Does it go on the older smartphone recorder then?
Yeah. So I've heard, was it Dave Edmonds was telling you that he sings at his phone all the time?
Yeah, I think it does as well. Just hundreds of little memos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're walking down the road with the dogs and you get an idea, hang on, I'll just check the laptop out.
Sure. So particularly if I've got a project to work on. So I work for music and creative arts, and recently the last couple of years, I've written 2 kids musicals, and those,
yes.
In your head, I've got to get a song about this kind of thing that's going to fit this kind of style. Yeah. And when you've got a project like that and you've got some permutations in your mind, if it strikes you, you've got to get it down straight away. So my phone is full of me singing kids musical songs, I think. But if it's something a bit more developed and a bit more serious, for want of a better word, then I'd probably get an idea, get it on the piano, and once I've worked out my harmony, get it on the computer as quickly as possible.
You say you really find it hard to do lyrics and music. So is it more common for people to come to you with an idea and say, do you know what, like that, or you find an old song and you think, do you know what, I can think of a tune comes to your head?
Yeah, so I've done lots of writing tunes to old lyrics. I'm not a very good collaborator, I don't think.
Really?
Yeah, I tried collaborating with a few people on songwriting, and I just find it really, really difficult. My general instinct with anything creative is your first idea tends to be your best idea. You can refine that idea, you can make that better, but the first thing that pops into your head, if it's instinctive and it's singable or it's playable, that's what you're after. So I find it really hard to come up with an idea and I'm like, right, I've got this, and then you give it to someone else and they go, oh, could it be that? And I feel a bit kind of like, well, it could, but that's not what I had. So I find it really hard collaborating. And the thing I find really hard about lyric writing, I think in the Salvation Army, if you look at our songbook, if you look at the Sing to the Lord volumes, there are some incredible lyricists that we've had.
Yeah.
You know, historically, some really, really beautiful songs that express something that's really, really powerful. Mm-hmm. And whilst I understand the craft of songwriting, what I don't have is like...
yet.
Well, maybe yet, but I just don't think I have a profound way of explaining things. I think I have a simple way of explaining things.
That's the best way of doing it, starting simple.
So it works well with the singing company, but it might not be so poetic and florid and interesting when you get to other forms of song, I guess.
I do wonder about that, because sometimes, I mean, you get some really heavy, famous, well-known songs to pieces, and they are written for the journals, not specifically a massed chorus. They're written for a songs brigade to perform in a music festival at a local corps. And some of them stick in your mind. I find some of the heavy ones just sort of, they get lumped and then they just go out of fashion, whereas the quirky ones, the simple ones, the ones that you learn really quickly, get stuck up there. And you'll find they'll get into the congregation. I mean, I Dare to Be Different.
Yeah.
You know, I've been changed. I mean, some of these ones, I've been changed. I've been newborn. My life has been. I personally love "To God Be the Glory," to the Chris Mallett version. I think it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it's got life and it's memorable. And I think if you can make it simple and it sticks in people's brains, it's serving a purpose. And however, 2 times, I know I do it many times. I probably do it every Sunday when we have meetings. Is the officer will use a song and I've got to go home and who wrote it, where did it come from, what's the story behind the song?
Sure.
And it's that story that's important, isn't it?
Yeah, often it is. So I've done all sorts of things in my music career, and a lot of them have not been related to my faith and not been related to the army. I did a lot of time as the lead singer in a gigging rock band in Liverpool, and I used to write, my first band, I wrote all of our songs, but none of them were about anything serious, because I cannot come up with a solid way of expressing any serious idea And my faith is a very serious thing, and because of that, I just don't know how to express that
You
in
could be
words.
the next generation Norman Bearcroft. A very
Oh,
serious guy in faith, but has a very beautiful outlook on life.
maybe.
Maybe that's God's plan. We don't know. I mean, as you think, you're at the start of your career, and you've got the footsteps going. You've got things published, so your name is going to get known, and it is already known.
I guess so.
Yeah, I think just keep following him. So, who are when you are writing? Who are the people that inspire you? Your mentors, the ones that give you that helping hand of positive critique rather than, hang on a minute, something's gone wrong here.
Yeah,
Have you ever
I
sort
mean,
of had the pleasure of sitting next to a piano player and they've gone, do you know what? Shall we have a go at this? And you've just,
I guess maybe one of my stumbling blocks has been that I don't really have a mentor. I guess at my core, that we've got a really good pianist who often, if I've written something vocal and I haven't written something vocal for a good while, would play through the piano part and sing it for me. Or when I was still living at home with my parents, my mum would play everything piano-wise that I wrote, and that's really useful because whilst I can tinkle and whilst I can bash out things that are in here, I've never had a piano lesson, so I couldn't play my own piano parts most of the time. So it's good to have somebody who can check it and make sure it's real world. When I write for band, again, if I can get it in front of a band to play it, the real world sound of it is really important. But actually, in terms of somebody who sits down with you and talks about your ideas, I haven't really had that very much.
still to come, maybe.
Maybe everyone who, I think, is it everybody who you've spoken to from Britain has said that they've spent some time with Ken, and Ken has played with their pieces, and they've just sat with their mouth wide open. I have had a couple of experiences of sitting with Ken. And
particularly there already. I mean, you've sat with the maestro.
Yeah, I mean, sitting with Ken is incredible because I think Ken Downey is just one of those people who knows something that the rest of us don't. I'm not quite sure what it is. I'm not quite sure.
Definable question mark. Yeah.
How we might explain it. But I went to the latest music editorial composers day for aspiring brass composers, I think it was phrased as, and Ken talked us through Imperfect Peace, and he played certain parts of it, and he's going, and this 2 bars here is that idea from the tune, and this 2 bars here is that idea from the tune, and in my head I'm going, we know that's fine, that's right, I've got that. And then he goes, and then I've got through the first iteration of the tune, and then I just play these chords, and now we're into section 2. And I'm like, whoa, those chords were the thing I came for. Those chords were the thing that I don't get. How did you do that incredible sequence? Where did that come from? And he's just, he's that good. I don't think maybe he knows how to tell us.
Who else was at the conference then that you were able to not necessarily talk business with, but...
Well, yeah. Well, absolutely talking business with. I spent my one-to-one session with Andrew Mackworth.
Lovely man.
He was great. And again, it's the only time I've ever actually met Andrew and spoken to him at any length.
He's a lovely man.
But he is a great guy. And I walked into the room with this Triumph series arrangement of the contemporary song Praise is Rising. He'd had it for a week beforehand to listen over to it, and I walked in the room, and before I'd said anything, he said to me, "I think you might be my love child," which was I love that. This kind of I've ever had. But he was kind of insinuating that I was going to pick up the Salvation Army disco baton from him somehow.
Yes, he has that.
Had that kind of.
He's in the queue if I can get hold of him to ask him some inane questions, because
absolutely,
I think
he will anecdote, I'm sure. Yeah.
I think it's funny because when I was speaking to Ian Feltwell, he I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, and if he does, I do apologise profoundly. Is he wanted to go back and look at his pieces. He said sometimes I find it very hard to remember a piece of music because if I've written it, it's there, it's out. I'm moving on to next piece. Andrew can remember every single chord and every single part of every single piece of music he's ever written.
Yeah.
I think you were in a well-earned company. So, so what were the the people that inspired you growing up then? I mean, you're in the Salvation Army, you know, the
Sure.
music you played, the music you heard, you know, you had records, you had tape cassettes, CDs, that kind of thing. When you were in particularly sectional practices at your core, who were the composers, who were the pieces that really spoke to you at the time and helped encourage your own thinking process in the music writing?
So growing up, I definitely remember I had a really lovely core band, maybe kind of 15 to 20 of us most of the time.
Lovely.
Just some really good people there, some really just generous, kind, encouraging people that were really fabulous to be alongside. And I remember sitting down to play The Light of the World and Mid All the Traffic and there was a Ken Downey piece, Standing Somewhere in the Shadows, that I just thought was fabulous the first time I played that, you know, doing something completely different that I'd never played before. So as a brass player, those sorts of pieces were speaking to me. And it's funny that I seem to have developed a kind of a lollipop style in some ways in brass writing, and that's not the kind of piece that really I love.
Yeah.
I'm not quite good enough to write the kind of piece that I want to write at the moment, I think.
You underestimate yourself, I think.
Maybe. I mean,
Maybe
I'm
the
thinking on behalf
confidence.
of somebody who's submitted pieces to music editorial since I was 15, and I think I must have submitted 40 pieces in that time and got 6 published. So there's definitely, you know, there's definitely work to do.
Yeah, I mean, we've got composers out there who've submitted hundreds, and you
Sure.
know, I think what we forget is that we've got so many wonderful composers. I mean, Sam Creamer was saying that he's got to actually hold back. He said because, as Ray Allen has famously said in the interview, you can write and write and write and write and write, but at the end of the day, if it's gathering dust on the shelf, it's a bit of a waste of effort. He said, I want it to be used. I want to be able to spread the message. And at the same time, Music Ministries has only got certain slots for the
Yeah.
music publication, haven't they? I mean, yes, we'd love them to say, okay, every Salvationist composer put online and you can download the parts and you can find it. But the reality is that they have to adhere to a structure. And we're very grateful for that. And it means that we can encourage young composers like yourself, and I don't speak as an old mentor, to really craft that gift of yours. And I think you're well on the way. I think, you know, your Unity series stuff is playable and functional. You know,
Sure.
some Unity series stuff, you do wonder what's going on, but it's a case of sitting down and work out. I mean, yes, you could quite easily sit down there and say, right, I'm on holiday in 2 weeks' time. I'm going away for the week. The family are all going to stay at grandma's. I'm going to write that epic masterpiece for the symphony sounds next year.
Oh no, that's a long way off. A
And
long way
it's
off.
not an idea that you could dismiss. I mean, if God has said to you to do it, I mean, you've got the
Sure.
talent. So, you know, I mean, how interesting is it to sort of, you know, if you get an idea, I mean, well, what's the most common thing for you? Is it to sort of take a contemporary song, make a brass arrangement, or do something for the vocal side that maybe hasn't been done before? Which sort of idiom do you prefer?
In terms of, are you asking kind of where ideas tend to come from, or how do I start?
Well, it's kind of do you have a comfortable zone? Is it, you know, like you played in a rock band and you've got the experience of different genres of music. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I look at your vocal compositions and yet they're all for children's voices, but sometimes you want a bright, snappy piece, sometimes you want a prayer piece.
Mm-hmm.
So you might hear a Graham Kendrick piece, you might hear a Hillsong piece, you think, you know what, I'll have a stab at a brass arrangement. Or you hear something, a tune on the
Sure.
radio, you think, you know what?
So one thing I'm really aware of is that I'm at a core at Liverpool Alton where I'd say at least 50% of our congregation have not grown up with Salvation Army music.
Yep.
For one reason or another. Most of them because they've come to faith in recent years, or come to the Salvation Army certainly in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm aware that the idea of an instrumental brass band piece to express an idea or to convey a message is actually quite difficult to understand within the world's musical climate. So instrumental music is not popular these days. You don't get instrumental music in the charts or on Radio 1 or Radio 2. It just doesn't happen. So we've got to change, or I think in our context, we've got to change how we think about using a brass band, and just expecting people to understand the context of how that works is going to miss the mark with lots of people. Yeah. So most of the music I've written in recent years has been based on tunes that we in our congregation would be familiar with, and would be very familiar with a lot of the time. And although there's lots of
context, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, virtually every composer I've spoken to has said the chord down the road is the one that's immediately in their mind. The 6 or 8 players, you know the strengths, you know what's popular. You're living with them. They're your friends, your family. On a Sunday, they're, you know, you meet them in the supermarket on a Saturday. You know what each other's listening to. They're sharing music, so you know what's in the idiom.
Yeah,
and you can tailor that.
I've been a music teacher with bands. I've been a YP band leader and sing company leader who, if I'm honest, mostly played or used music that I'd written or arranged. And a lot of that was down to, a lot of that time I was spent writing for very specific players. So you learn how to write a band piece where actually the most capable player is your tuba player, and then it's your cornet player, and actually euphonium player, he just needs something a bit tidier and a bit easier to get on with. Or you've got a really strong first horn player, so you rely on them for all the interesting things that happen in the background. That kind of thing has been a lot of my writing in the last 10 years, I guess. I used to knock up a singing company piece on a Thursday morning in a free period at school so that I'd be ready for sing company practice on a Thursday night at times. So it's not always profound.
Very Albert Osborne.
Well, maybe it's not profound and beautiful, but it's kind of functional with it. And also it just proves that I'm very disorganized. But yeah, so a lot of the time I've written for someone specific, and I guess that's shaped the way that I write my band music. Like, so for example, several of my band arrangements, in fact all of my band arrangements that I've produced, I think, that have been published, have got interesting bass parts, because at the time I was the E-flat bass player, and I know what it's like to be sat there back with you know, here are the crotchets, blah 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 blah. I'm fed up of those now. Whereas I would play. You're just a secret
Les Condon, aren't you? You just want to write the next Les Gilmore and put the tuba players out front, and you know.
Sure. So yeah, my time spent on the back row of the band has taught me that interesting bass parts are necessary and are a thing to be revelled in when you get the opportunity. Now that I'm back on the front row cornet, I'm remembering that writing high parts for cornets is not a great idea all the time. So, you know, you learn your lessons from where you're sitting in the band yourself, I guess, as well.
Well, it's very interesting. So, having done that, I mean, you've tailored, you've moved around. I always find it geographically interesting, even with the UK, to see differences in chords. So, from a musical arrangement composer, whatever title you wish to distinguish yourself with, I've said before that I know choruses that I've learned since a child at Woodbridge that 7 miles down the road at Ipswich, they wouldn't have heard of. Yeah. So how has that affected your writing when you move from, you know, Liverpool or wherever, and you're presented with a problem where you go, do you know what? We've used that for years. And it's kind of, don't know that one, and you've got to sort of come up with something juicy for the singing company to sing. How does that help you?
You do encounter that, I guess, particularly with contemporary worship stuff. So in my job now, I work for the Music and Creative Arts team, and I'm traveling around my region, and I am aware that particularly contemporary worship, there is a very different understanding in different core contexts. And my core is reasonably contemporary, I would say. We're not especially traditional. So we use a lot of contemporary music, and I often find myself, you know, going to lead a meeting at a core down the road and saying, oh, do you know this one? No. Do you know this one? No. Do you know this one? Oh, we kind of know that one. Right, we'll stick with that one, and we'll get at that. So, for example, my Praise is Rising that I've written, I guess there will be lots of cores that don't really know that song particularly well. So maybe that will be a learning journey if that were to be used at chorus or not, I don't know. I've got good father. Do you know the Chris Tomlin song? Again,
I
a
probably
really
wouldn't know if I
beautiful
heard
song.
it. Yeah.
There you go.
I mean,
See, so
I,
in our core, if I
it's
say
brilliant.
good father, everyone would know it, because it's one that everyone's really kind of learnt to love and learnt to feel. But so I think the army music landscape is changing subtly, and over time it will continue to do that. So the variation between different core will have an impact on that.
But I
But
think
then on the
yeah,
other hand, there are times when you learn a piece of music from the band arrangement and it becomes a congregational favourite.
yeah,
So the first time I heard Hide Me Now was Paul Sharman's arrangement for band.
hmm
Then at TYC, Territorial Youth Choir, one year, he arranged it for voice. So we sang it at Territorial Youth Chorus.
yeah,
Put the music back, and in the meantime, we've learned it as a congregational song, and people absolutely love that song. It's got
yeah.
a beautiful message. So it can work both ways, I guess. It's just the challenge of the modern Salvation Army as it is.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So, how do you try to make sure that you don't sort of intentionally closet yourself to a certain spectrum, but, you keep yourself open to the different things so that the inspiration and the challenge remains fresh. So you find something, and as I said, originality, you find a contemporary Christian song, a tune or something, and you want to turn it into brass, or you want to zizz it up for the singing company, at the main time maintaining the core message. How do you approach that?
So if I'm writing a sync company, I've only done original stuff for the same company pretty much. So that's either taking somebody else's lyrics and writing a tune, or having a stab at doing some words roughly myself. If it's for a band, the way it starts is I've got to have an idea of how to re-harmonize a tune.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the element of music that speaks to me most strongly is harmony. So I will sit down at the piano and I will play a tune, and once I've worked out roughly what the correct harmony is, then I'll play it as many different ways as I can imagine until I find a pattern that I go, oh, hello, that's where the interesting thing is in that phrase. And that's where I would start a band piece usually, just by sitting at the piano and having a rough idea. Occasionally, I will sit down and I'll go, you know what, that song is just so powerful, I've got to have a go at it. And 9 times out of 10, I will walk away from the computer with 16 bars written and just think, I had a stab, but at the moment, I'm not ready for that. I'll come back. But occasionally, I hit it and I go, oh, that's all right. We'll have a go at playing that out. But yeah, for me, harmony is the big draw. And once I've got a reharmonized verse or chorus or just something that really gets my attention, that's where a band piece will start.
So do the sections at your core delight when they've got a Danny piece on the stands, or is it a case of, can we go to McDonald's please now?
I'm not sure delight is the word. My YP band used to love the pieces I wrote for them because, like I say, when you write for players, you put stuff up on the stand which is ideal for them. So my YP band loved my pieces because it was songs they recognised, and it was music that they could play reasonably quickly a lot of the time and make it sound quite good quite quickly. So that was a real winner for them. The senior band have eventually learned not to roll their eyes and huff at every time they see my name on a piece of music.
In residence then?
Yeah, maybe. When I was at university, I studied a lot of avant-garde music and very contemporary classical music. So it's taken me a long time to get that kind of dissonant, clashy harmony out of my system and to tame it down. I remember.
That sounds like a bad thing. I mean, if it's in your harmony and it's been creatively used,
but it's not necessarily very accessible, I think. So
that's an important key, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I've had quite a lot of conversations with Andrew Blythe about harmony, and he has been particularly keen for me to tame that aspect of my nature so that we have something. I remember submitting a sync company piece, and his argument was if you play that first chord on a Sunday morning in the meeting, people are going to think, what's going on here? He says you don't want to start off with people on the back foot. And I get where he's coming from. I do understand what he's saying. It's still in my nature to put some of that in there, you know, the devil in me, or the mischief of writing music and the fun of it. Sometimes means that you put in the odd bits and pieces that maybe shouldn't be there, or can only just get in through the skin of its teeth, kind of thing.
But it's the learning process, isn't it? It's the kind of, at the back of your brain, you're desperately wanting to say, if I'm not making this accessible, and if I'm making it, you know, you're allowing the zaniness to come through, but it's got to be tempered with a sort of sensibility and a cohesion, so that the group that it's intended for, whether it's a case of I'm writing this or they want it, you can't sort of let the firework go off unintentionally. You've got to control it. And at the same time, the Lord is helping you there, isn't he? So, you know, you could have this free firecracker in you, but, you know, it's got to be right from the music, hasn't it?
Sure, and I think that's why when I was talking about Ken and his imperfect piece, those incredible chords that take you in and out of different keys and then eventually finish up back where it lives at the end, that is a very powerful and very moving experience to listen to and to play. And summing up the idea that I will stay at perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, and your mind is stayed on that one note, but everything else moves around that one note and changes until it settles back on the tonic chord at the end. What a clever idea to express that one very, very simple phrase. And I would love to have the ability to do those interesting chords without it becoming something that's difficult to listen to. And Ken's music isn't difficult to listen to most of the time. It's very easy to listen to. It's quite hard to play. And I think that's probably why when my music went up on the stand at Walton and people looked at a copy and went, oh, great. Because actually imagining what these chords are going to sound like and knowing where my note fits with the person sat next to me.
Yeah.
We're used to that being a very straightforward thing to do a lot of the time. And if that's not a straightforward thing, then do we play notes differently? I think we do. We tense up and we play notes out of tune or slightly sharp or timidly or whatever when we're uncertain. And if you put too much uncertainty in, you end up with problems. So I'm teetering on the brink there somewhere at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. You touched on a subject that's come up, because one of the things that I'm really benefiting from the non-composer talking to the composer and learning about the intricacies and say, we're not having a masterclass in the technical ability. I'm saying, you know, you're all at different stages, all at different levels. And one of the things that you just sort of mentioned was, you know, getting in there and say, okay, you can write this band piece and you can write this choir piece. You'll write whatever on Sibelius or on the music notation. And it's all perfect in pitch. And then you get the cornet players playing it and the horn players playing it, and your ear picks up that it's perfect on the stage, on the page, but in the band, it doesn't quite work. And it allows your mind to. Do you get that when, you know, as a composer, that you can then go, good, fine. That gives me to just tweak it and alter it and make it.
Sure, absolutely. Quite often. Again, if we go back to that Composer's Day, there was an argument, or not an argument, a conversation between Andrew Blythe and Ken Downey, and I can't remember which said which, but one of them said the hardest thing to do is to get your music played for the first time, and the other one says actually the hardest thing to do is to get your music played for the second time. And I guess what they're saying is, once it's been played and you go away and you go, I need to fix this bar and that bar and this chord here doesn't quite work. Yeah. To convince somebody to have another go when they know that the first one didn't really work particularly well, that's a really tricky thing. So I know I've sat down with band pieces and we've played them through and I've just gone, oh, okay, where do we go from there? Because that wasn't what was in my brain when I put it on the computer. So, and sometimes I guess maybe it's a faulty imagination, maybe it's the not understanding the mechanics of the person sat next to you and all that sort of stuff. And maybe it's just sometimes you have an idea that's not a good one. And that's okay. You know, I'm willing to accept that I've got bad ideas.
I don't. I mean, I like the saying that there's no such thing as bad. You can never use a scripture piece wrong, and scripture is never wrong. And
No, God,
if it's a God, if you feel it's a God-inspired piece, then it will provide a useful asset. I mean, how many composers, and you probably had this yourself, you've written a piece and you've noted down some notes and it's been put away in the cupboard because it just doesn't work. And then a few years later or a few months later, you're thinking, okay, I've got to this point and this isn't clicking. Hang on a minute, I'll just go and take that. And it just, with a little bit of alteration, it fits in. So it could just be the case of God saying to you, look, mate, you know, put it aside and in 6 weeks' time, it's going to make sense. It's not going to be silly.
Maybe. I think the other thing to remember as well is that we all know people, or we can all think of positions that people can hold based on scripture, which are opposing to each other. Yeah. So the people who think one thing and the people who think a diametrically opposed thing, and they've both read the same scriptures and they've interpreted them, and somewhere along the lines that interpretation is different. And it's so when that inspiration comes from God or from the Holy Spirit, or my theology on this is not wonderful, but wherever that inspiration comes to me from, when that inspiration hits me, I'm having to interpret that with my own skills and abilities and my own musical education and my own musical experience. And somewhere through filtering all of that, maybe sometimes I put the wrong color on things, or maybe I put the wrong, and maybe sometimes I get it right, and God's going, yeah, that's the one. Give that to the band now. They'll do the job from here. Yeah. So you know,
it's an embryonic process, isn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
You don't consider yourself the perfect composer who could sit down and say that hymn tune arrangement, boom, it's perfect first time. It's a learning curve. Every composer is going to make mistakes. And any composer that doesn't is a pretty egotistical person. I've never yet met anyone in the composing world, or writes music, or just twiddles, even person said, you know what, that chord, that section, it's not clicking, it's not gelling. And I just, for the life of me, don't know why. I said, at home, I can hear it in my brain. The massed choir and the mass band in the Albert Hall are doing it absolutely perfectly. I can't think what's, and yet you have to have that reality of your friends and your family going, yeah, that section B, not gelling. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You've got that wonderful support structure, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And there are occasions, not all that many, but there are occasions where I think to myself, but I still think it does work. And somebody else will think, no, it doesn't work. And you just have to be okay with that. You just have to be okay with the fact that different people think and feel different things. Dean talked about it, I think, with a part that had gone into one of his songs to pieces, but he couldn't go in a songs to piece, but he managed to get into Glorifico Aeternam, just because that chord passage in his head was the right one, and he stuck with his guns, and he had to find somewhere to put it. And you will get times like that. I definitely get times where I think, no, that should have worked. That should have worked. It hasn't worked, but it should have. I understand the logic of it, and I understand the theory of it. But you know, that's just how people are.
You've never had Ken Downey on the phone and you've said, you know what, I've got this chord structure and it isn't working. Can you tell me why?
I've never had the audacity to ring Ken and suggest that one of my chord structures should be observed by him so closely. But different people think different things. Yes. That's all I've got on that. I mean, my musical tastes are really quite broad, you know, from classical to jazz to rock to funk to you name it. I'll have a dabble in it. But there are also lots of pieces of music, or lots of styles, or lots of bands that I just can't stand, that just upset me. And they're really popular with other people, and they're just not popular with me. So we've all got those opinions and those.
And that helps shape you and guide your music writing, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, a question that's just come to me. I mean, you say that from a very young age you were dabbling in music and you had a musical background. So when you transferred to Liverpool and settled in Liverpool, how long was it before they realised that the creative genius in you was there? I mean, you settled, I mean, obviously transferred into the sections and took the active roles that you do. How long was it before the music leader, hang on a minute, this guy has got some good gifts here?
So, well, in terms of actually getting pieces played, I had bits and pieces used or at least tried out in my first few years at Walton. When you transfer somewhere and you say, I'm going to do a music degree, people have kind of a perception of it. You're going to be one of two things. You're going to be a player or you're going to be a composer. And whilst I play, I'm not a first class player. So I'm handy on lots of instruments, but I'm not great on anything, if I'm honest with you. So I would have found it difficult to hide the fact that I'm a composer at heart. And so in my final year, I wrote a piece for brass and then got guys at the Corps to record it for my submission. So that was a real eye opener. I think that was where I earned my reputation as somebody who writes things that are impossible to play in my corps, because it was really avant-garde stuff and it was way out of the brass band world. And it just was, it was an interesting experience for everyone, I think.
So what's in the pipeline then? I mean, we've got all this lockdown. I mean, as Sam has said in Australia, he's tried to steer away from it because he could just open the floodgates and be writing. You've got the realism of family, of the commitments of that, and the home learning, and the constraints of not being able to go to the park and walk the dog in the way that you'd normally be able to. But has that meant that people have not, have you been lucky enough to have people ring you up and ask you for different things and give you ideas?
No, so generally that doesn't happen to me. Maybe that's something I should take as a hint.
Right,
as well.
We'll get that started.
People don't ring me and ask for things all that often. But actually lockdown for me has been an interesting experience because I'm doing most of the care for our two young boys. A lot of my time is quite intensely taken up. I'm also, I think I said to you on one of my messages earlier when we were trying to arrange this, I'm in the middle of 6 virtual choirs or bands at the moment, both the recording and mixing process and the video editing. So my headspace for composition is none at all at the moment. So I won't write anything until I've got some headspace. And luckily for me, because I've got the job I've got where I can drive around the region, I tend to get these kind of hour and a half, 2 hour periods in the car quite often where I'm sat with my thoughts. That's when things originally strike me a lot of the time. But if my life is full, I won't write anything.
Would you have it? I mean, if someone came to you and said, I want an instrumental solo for our YP band, would there be a particular instrument you would be really happy doing, comfortable writing? I mean, do you have a favourite? When you say you've done cornet and tuba, so I mean, someone asked you for a horn solo or something, would you feel that's a challenge, or does it make no difference to you?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because in terms of what instrument it was, I would have no concern over which instrument it was. I think I've got enough experience on almost all of the instruments in the band to feel comfortable writing, at least for a YP band player. What I don't have much experience of is solos, because I'm not that fabulous a player. I haven't played big solos. And also, that's not really something that strikes me as particularly interesting musically. So I would much rather write a piece that would be used on a Sunday morning in the meeting than a big flashy solo. That doesn't really do very much for me. It's incredible when you see the guys playing them, and a lot of solos, are fabulous pieces of music. But the ones that get me and make me feel emotional are the beautiful, soft, gentle pieces, or the ones that make you feel really joyful are the little this or that's just bright and happy. And
you touched on your job. So for those people who have no idea of what your when you're not in lockdown and your daily commute is going to plan, what's on your job description? What are you supposed to be doing on a daily wake, a daily journey?
So I'm the regional specialist for the Warrington region in the Salvation Army for the Music and Creative Arts team, and that can mean a completely different thing every day, to be perfectly honest.
That's
good. So it incorporates all sorts of things. I do occasional work with sections. I haven't done a huge amount of work with sections. I've done lots of kids music workshops, some samba drumming, some singing, some all sorts of things like that. I do lots of the singing by heart, the dementia choirs, in chorus. Just writing the kids musicals for holiday clubs has been great. Basically, my as I understand it, and I guess everyone will do it slightly differently because they're skill based, but as I understand it is when a local corps needs something from me that's to do with music and creative arts, I have to find a way to make that work for them. And if that's me imparting some knowledge or giving them a piece of music that works or editing a video that works for them, then that's fine. And if it's not, it's me pointing the direction at, if somebody asks me about dance, I've got nothing. But this guy or this girl down the road, you get in touch with them, and that's so.
You add as a functional to be able to say, I can't do it, but I know a person who can.
Sure. So the things that cover that, and there are many, that would be what I'd do. Yeah, absolutely.
And favourite Salvation Army song as of 9 o'clock tonight? When you entered the room to sit down.
If I were to turn around and play the piano now, the first thing in my head would be "It Is Well With My Soul."
Oh, gorgeous.
It's just a beautiful piece of music in any arrangement. So that particularly speaks to me with the story behind that. I know the Who Thou Art that we mentioned earlier would be one of those. When I Survey the Wondrous Cross is just another one with beautiful images that really speak to me.
Yeah. And
then, like I said, there's so much contemporary music that's in my frame of reference all the time that I could pick 100 pieces. We'd be here all night.
Yeah. I know we could very easily. Last piece of I'll make it a little bit easier. Last piece of music that really touched you and moved you within a Salvation Army context, vocal or brass or whatever, that sort of pulled the heartstrings. You thought, oh, do you know what? How?
The last piece that I remember really, really grabbing me and really kind of moving me in the moment. And for me, I don't tend to get that so much listening. Music for me, I feel, is much more participatory. So if I'm playing or if I'm singing, then that music strikes me a lot more than if I'm listening.
Very natural.
I think most musicians probably feel that would be my guess. Then Serenity, the Eric Ball piece, Serenity, which is It Is Well With My Soul. Our band played that, it's a few months ago, but I remember that. It's just a really powerful piece of music, and it speaks to me every time.
Interesting you say Eric Ball, because you kind of get the classic Ballsian pieces get out. But as you say, you've got to connect to the young people these days. I wouldn't have gone for Eric Ball. Some of his functional stuff on the uni, but it would not be a name I would have used nowadays in a modern context.
So for me, Serenity, if we think about that piece of music specifically, the story of It Is Well With My Soul and the guy who wrote it, whose name has just popped out of my head on the boat from...
was it Philip Paul Bliss or my...
No, it's not. No, name's completely gone. I couldn't tell you now off the top of my head. But the story of him writing that song and being on the boat and passing the point where his family had died, and that's what inspired him to write that song, is so evocative and so powerful that I explained that to the congregation before the band played it.
Yeah.
And then the music that Eric Ball has written is stormy in places, and it is beautifully calm in places. And that's a really easy sell to people, to say, listen out for this, and you will get to a point where you understand this idea. So for me, that...
Gates Spafford.
There you go. Horatio Spafford. What a name.
Yeah. Relating following circumstances, his wife and daughters were travelling to Europe when their ship was sunk and his daughters were lost at sea. She was rescued and made her way to Paris, but he visited the verses and it's compiled by Philip Paul Bliss, so it's compiled by Philip Paul Bliss. So It Is Well With My Soul, a very, very powerful one. So, yes, it's just
the arrangement that is so colourful.
Yeah,
if you know the story, that arrangement does something amazing for you, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, we've said all the way along. I mean, every composer, and you yourself will know this, I believe, that every piece of music that you write has a testimony, has a story behind it.
Yeah.
And you can say, you know what, this is really what my thinking was. I was listening to the radio, you know, this song came up and I went away and this piece of music came out, this arrangement came out of it. So, you know, it's a very natural thing to do, isn't it? To have this, personal, testifiable story behind your music.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the reason for writing, isn't it? Is to express something that words can't. If I go back to why I'm no good as a lyricist, I don't have words to express what my faith means to me. But music does something that gets somewhere along that journey, you know. And yeah.
Yeah. As you entered the room tonight for the sit in front of the piano, favourite Bible quote?
I did think about this because I was watching one of these earlier on for research purposes.
That helps.
He's going to ask that, and I'm rubbish at remembering Bible verses, but I've got.
I love quoting them, but I can never remember.
There you go. Yeah. So I've got here one that was shared in our band. We do a weekly band Zoom at the moment.
Oh, perfect. Yes.
And
always an encouragement to hear.
Yeah. We're still in contact. It's good. And one of our tuba players, Wes, shared these verses, and it's Proverbs 16, 1-3, and it says, "Mortals make elaborate plans, but God has the last word. Humans are satisfied with whatever looks good. God probes for what is good. Put God in charge of your work, and then what you've planned will take place." And I think in terms of thinking about writing music, those verses really say something about that process to me.
Making sure God's in the driving seat.
Absolutely. And avoiding elaborate plans and sticking to what he gives you is the thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you said yourself earlier about making mistakes, and I think that goes back to the core of it, that if we're keeping God in mind and he's saying, okay, this is for this group, then if it's going wrong for a reason, and perhaps we need to go away and think about it and calm the brain down and sort of go, do you know what, Lord, okay, I need to step away from this because this is, and the fact that he already knows that, and the fact that he's already there and said, that's fine, go and spend some time with the kids, go and have that cup of tea. You know, there's no good forcing a piece of music. I mean, if you have time constraints, you have things that you have to do to a time limit, but God is in the center. Sure. And I think it's very important for us to remember that, isn't it?
Absolutely. One thing that's just occurred to me as you said that, Melvin, that I had thought about previously and meant to say, is that for me, the moment when my pieces, my band pieces became more useful to core bands was the moment when I stopped thinking about, I want to write this idea and I've got this thing and I've got this style, and I stopped thinking about that and I started thinking about who's going to listen to this and what does it feel like to them. And I think when I was writing for Singing Company or writing for YP Band, I was thinking about the YP Band members and the Sing Company members, and my music for them was successful. And when I start thinking about the core band and I start thinking about this, that changes everything. So that idea that I need to I can be satisfied with what looks good, but God probes for what is good. That idea that I need to remove myself from all those big elaborate ideas that might come into my brain and just focus on something that gives a message to the people who are going to listen to it. That's changed for me. So
and that's what God is using you for. I said, if he didn't want you to write the music, you wouldn't have the gift. But we thank God that he has blessed you with this magnificent, wonderful gift. I've never been blessed with it. I would love to have written a piece of music, but I accept the fact that it's not going to happen. This is not God's plan for me. It's God's plan for you. And it's very clear that you're totally happy to trust him and that he will guide you. So I'll say a prayer and then I'll switch off the recording. So, Lord, to be well with our soul, to have that peace like a river flowing through us, it's what we all strive for, Lord. I pray for Daniel, I pray for his family, I pray for his friends, his colleagues, his parents, his people who continue to encourage him, to guide him, to mentor him, to poke him in the side when something isn't working, to remind him that there are things in life that he may need to concentrate on that has got shifted around by his zany brain, Lord. But we know, Lord, that You are in the center of his life. You are in the center of his family's life. You are what is important to him, and that spreading the word with the gifts that you have blessed him with is a big thing, Lord, and a big challenge. And it's one that he's accepted and he is keen to follow, to enhance, to grow with, and to watch come to fruition. And we pray, Lord, for all the musicians that come into contact with him and his family over the next few days and weeks, and they will feel blessed because that God-centered part of him is really showing. And that we pray that as he continues to write and compose and be inspired by you, Lord, that he makes sure that you are at the very center of it all, and that your voice is clearly being heard. And that sometimes, Lord, to try and decipher what you're saying is sometimes seems impossible, but we know that our faith in you is such that you will not let us down, and that you have the answer. And sometimes, very often, Lord, it's totally different to what we could possibly have imagined. But we know that when you give the answer, Lord, it's the right answer for the right situation. It may seem balmy, Lord, but we thank you that you have just got the right answer for the right question at the right time, Lord. So I pray for Danny. I pray that you'll keep hold of him, uphold him and his family in your love, in your hands, and that he will continue to write powerfully for the Salvation Army and for all those in the Christian world who need that special touch that you've endowed him with. In your name I pray, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Right, 3.
Thanks, Mo.